For to go live. Is it showing? It always goes to you first, Ron.
I think we're live. Yeah, I think
not on mine yet.
You're not. It's saying that we're live here. I think we're here.
All right. It takes a second though to talk to YouTube, and boom, there it is. Good afternoon, everybody. How is everybody doing? Today is Thursday, October 27th, 2022. I'm here with Ron, and we have a lot to talk about today. Lots of stuff going on. We both have construction outside of our residence, though, so it's been a little noisy as we've been sitting here. So hopefully it doesn't get to be too bad.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing, but they're hammering something here, man. Hopefully it's not too distracting, but I'm going to try to be muted whenever I'm not talking, and hopefully it stops soon. I don't know what they're doing exactly.
I don't know. Maybe
they're building another unit. Who knows?
Who knows? Anyway, so today we also have Right-Wing Insanity Report. I spoke with local investigative journalist James Stout about the American Guard as a group of what they call themselves as constitutional nationalists. If that sounds oxymoronic, you would be correct. So tune in after we're done here to watch that. In fact, let's play a little preview clip as we're waiting for people to log in. The first one I want to talk about is American Guard. American Guard was at Charlottesville. Their founder, Brian James, has a history of being associated with other Nazi movements like Hammerskin.
And they claim this sort of constitutional nationalism. They have this structure. It's kind of interesting. Like, they have a national congress made up of representatives of the states and like an executive committee and stuff. But I think by their estimates, their membership is in the hundreds, which I think is, these groups tend to overestimate their membership and certainly overestimate their active membership, right? I can think of it's less than a dozen people I can name who are part of the group, but they certainly had more people than that at Charlottesville, right? They were. Yeah, so there's a tweet which I'm sure you can link in the show notes or what have you that shows them arriving at Charlottesville.
Yeah, we do have that. Let's show the video. We do have that. So that's the video of them arriving in Charlottesville. You also see some American Vanguard guys there and some others. Brian James, who's the founder, was a Hammerskin. He's also been associated with the Proud Boys. I've seen him in multiple photos wearing Proud Boys shirts. What he's implying, in my opinion, is what the genocide he's talking about is what every Nazi is worried about: white genocide. It's not actual genocide as how we would define it, of the slaughter of a group of people like you've seen in the Holocaust or other places. So he's a hardcore.
Yeah. But if for some reason you feel like you want to leave, and you want to run with Enrique and the Bumblebees and Proud Boys, and this is what I'm telling you: the Proud Boys is splitting, and the real Proud Boys are leaving the Proud Boys and not calling themselves Proud Boys anymore. Do you guys understand that? I know that's hard for you to understand as new guys, and trust me, I'm not talking down to you. It's just, I'm trying to be clear and factual with you guys. What's going on?
He's a hardcore neo-Nazi, Brian James. All right, so that's a preview of what Right-Wing Insanity Report is going to look at today.
I have to ask a question.
Yeah.
So, all right, I'm not as ear to the ground on this stuff as you are. You do deep dives into this stuff, and I don't know how you have the stomach for it. All power to you. So there is a group now, a hate group, I take it, called the Bumblebees. Did I hear that right?
No.
Did I mishear that? What did he say? I heard. Did anyone? What else did you guys hear? I heard him say the Bumblebees. Did I mishear him?
That you did not mishear him. That is what he's calling the Proud Boys. So that individual, his name is Brian James. We'll talk about him in the show. He is an ex-Proud Boy, but he is a full-blown Nazi. He's part of Finlanders.
So wait, what the hell are the Bumblebees? What is
the Proud
that?
Boys? It's a reference to their black and yellow Fred Perry shirts. So it's a derogatory term. So the Proud Boys, the Bumblebees, they're not hardcore enough. So that is a video that.
That's what that means?
Yes.
So if the you're like, Proud Boys aren't hateful enough for me, those bumblebees. That's like if you're like a white supremacist scenester,
Right.
you call the okay, wow. I never needed
Now
to
you know.
I mean, now I know. Now I know. I mean, it's good, but I was just like, who are the bumblebees? I have to ask.
So, Ron, I love this comment.
It's a white power jazz group or something.
They've purity tested themselves. Paul's right. It's a purity test for white supremacists.
Wow.
Anyway, tune in after this. I spoke with James Stout, who is an investigative journalist that's done a lot of writing on these guys. He's been in The Nation and some other publications. So we took a deep dive into this group and a couple others that are associated with them. All right, so right off the top, let's get into it.
Don't be a bumblebee. Tune in.
Don't be a.
I'm sorry.
I
got to get over it, but
I know it's pretty funny.
Taking me a minute.
It's funny. I'm so used to seeing some of this stuff, and I've seen it so many times that it just doesn't strike me as anything. But you're right. That is pretty funny. All right. So we are going to talk about Rick Caruso. I know this is a local election here in Los Angeles. It does have national importance, though, for lots of reasons. But before we could actually talk about all of these things, we need to have an understanding, I think, of who Rick Caruso actually is. I doubt people outside of LA have paid much attention to this individual, but he is a guy that is obviously trying to buy the mayor's office for a lot of reasons. He is a real estate developer that's worth billions of dollars and has engaged in a lot of political corruption through the years. We can trace like packaged money. So, for example, this is how this works. They hire a law firm, either like Meyer Brown, Paul Hastings. These are lobbyist groups, but they're legal legal lobbyist groups, meaning they're attorneys that can handle both aspects of that. But they'll take money from their real estate developer clients, they'll package it together, and they'll give it to politicians, whether it's city council members, mayors, whoever else. And they do this in exchange for land entitlement deals or changes in the building code, things that they need to get their developments made. And it's pretty much taken over not only Los Angeles, but the state. And it is corruption. And it is the reason it's a direct cause, in my opinion, of the homelessness in the state. It's a direct cause of the gentrification and homelessness that's happened in Los Angeles. It's a direct cause of a lot of the income inequality. So I want to really highlight this particular individual, not only because he's running for mayor, but he is a case study for others like him, because he's not the only one doing this. So on that note, I want to put up an article. This is, I'm throwing back here to the early 2000s. This was originally in the LA Times. So can we put the Americana becomes a federal case. All right. So the Americana at Brand, this is one of Rick Caruso's largest properties. He has another one called The Grove. These are giant malls, more or less. And they also they're mixed use. They have apartments and whatnot. Currently, I think a studio apartment at the Americana at Brand will set you back $3,500. You heard that correctly. Studio.
Yeah,
apartment.
This is not affordable housing. I mean, these people who make it out, well, he wants to build housing. Okay. If you think Rick Caruso is going to do something for housing, I have a 4-bedroom bridge to sell you. All right. That's not what he's looking to do. But let's dive into who he is first.
Let's dive into who he is. Okay. So a property owner at the proposed Americana at Brand site filed a federal lawsuit against Glendale and its redevelopment agency, claiming that the agency does not have the authority to use eminent domain to purchase its land because the property is not blighted. All right, let's stop there. Let me explain something to you. What happened in this particular cause? There were 15 acres of land here in Glendale, 15 acres of land. None of it was blighted. There were small businesses on this land, mom and pop shops. There was a hotel owned by a father-son that was actually a nice enough hotel. There were restaurants, all kinds of places. This land was not blighted, folks. It was not blighted by any means. I live close to it. There was no way you would ever call this blighted. But this was the only way they could take that land away from these small businesses and whatnot and give it to Rick Caruso, which is exactly what the city council did. They said it was blighted. They used eminent domain to take the properties away. And Caruso did not pay a dime for any of the property. Zero. They handed him these 15 acres to do his own development on it, which is now exceedingly pricey apartments, stores like Tiffany and Company. So this is who Rick Caruso is. All
Well,
right.
we can go into some other things about him. I mean, politically, he is a Trump Republican. He's anti-choice. He covered up years of corruption at USC. I believe it was
He covered up sexual assault at USC. We're going to talk about that in a minute too. You're correct.
So, I mean, this guy has a long history, and he also, by the way, he is a registered Democrat, and he identifies via his own words, he is a proud Democrat. So
since January, I mean, he re-registered as a Democrat in January of this year, and he did it because he knows he cannot win an election in the state of California, let alone Los Angeles, unless he is a registered Democrat. This is a political calculation. It has absolutely nothing to do with his beliefs. If you look at his political donations, he has given to both parties, but not equally. He has given money to Kevin McCarthy. He has given money to the California GOP. He has given money to Mitch McConnell. Like, I'm trying to go through some of the extremists that he has supported. So he has supported some extreme candidates on the right that are definitely anti-choice and whatnot. On the left, he's given money to guys like Ted Lieu. I'm sure city council folks. Yeah, the left. But these are in exchange for something. I can guarantee there's some quid pro quo there. There's everything that Rick Caruso does is calculated.
It's a political move, absolutely, because here we'll stick with Los Angeles. The way it works here, for anyone not in the know, our local elections are nonpartisan. So there is no one's running for mayor as a Democrat or Republican. But the way it works here, we are so blue that unless you get endorsements from Democratic clubs, unless you get endorsements from different unions, many who have Democratic leaders, unless you get those things, you have no chance. So you have people who, whatever their actual beliefs or affiliations are, they will kind of play it that way. And someone like a Rick Caruso, he's like, oh yeah, I'm a proud Democrat. I'm part of the Democratic establishment. And he is ingrained in it now. Yeah, he's part of it. That is true. But he's, politically, he's just a MAGA Republican. But, I mean, politically, he's also not really any different from like a Joe Manchin. So that's who he is. I think
he's worse than Joe Manchin, but fair. I agree with that assessment. All right. So just because I could literally spend an hour and a half going through all of this Caruso stuff, let's move on to the next thing. I just want everybody to have a basic understanding of who this guy is. So this was an LA Weekly article from 2010, Rick Caruso's greedy land grab. This was in the LA Weekly. All right. Sometimes you got to go with the word resplendent. That's the only adjective that works for the Americana at brand. The Americana is an environment of faux gold sculpture, piped in music, nostalgia, architecture, and a main street named not for some hero, but for the developer of mass consumption, billionaire developer Rick Caruso. There's like a street sign in there that's called Caruso. The mall has helped put Glendale back on the map, a return on investment after the city used eminent domain to obtain much of the land. The city ended up with 15.5 acres downtown, then handed them over for no charge to Caruso. They gave him the land. They just gave it to him. Before the new shops arrived, real estate developer Gary Cragnotti took neighbors to another Caruso retail enclave, the Grove, in the Fairfax district. We should be giddy standing there by the fountain going, can you believe this is coming to Glendale, blah, blah, blah. So I want to scroll down for a second to this Glendale City. Okay, Cragnotti said this to Glendale City Council members in their role as the city's redevelopment agency at a November 30th meeting. The council and mayor were considering Caruso's proposal to expand Americana at brand with another 60,000 to 140,000 square feet of retail space, more landscaping, and another plaza. But standing in Caruso's way are two private properties that stick like a finger into the Americana's large footprint. Because the Golden Key Motel and the second building in 1920s brick structure are within Glendale's redevelopment area, they can be taken through eminent domain at fair market value in the midst of a historic property value collapse. So basically what we're talking about here is that original land grab wasn't enough for our greedy friend Caruso. He was able to acquire more acreage from these two adjacent other private owned businesses. They were not blighted, but because they were put into this redevelopment area that they said was blighted, they were able to take these properties away. And that is where they moved the new Nordstrom store, right? So the Nordstrom store had been in an older mall that's across the street. They closed that down and moved it into this place. I mean, so this is just how this stuff goes down, right? So you got a billionaire, He wants what he wants. He is able to give donations through packaging, through Mayor Brown, Paul Hastings, whoever he's using at that time.
Well, and let's keep in mind, too, this is how politics in LA works. This is what local politics is. This is the game Eric Garcetti has been playing for a long time. And Rick Caruso has deeper pockets and is infinitely more corrupt, which is hard to pull off. But he is even more corrupt than Eric Garcetti. So
he's definitely more corrupt.
You know, like do you want to touch on the USC thing before we get into
I want to show, I do. I definitely do. I want to put up a screenshot, however, of a Caruso staffer responding to a question because everybody needs to read this. All right. So how much affordable housing has Caruso built as a developer? Why this is an important question to ask is because Caruso is actually campaigning on being the cure for homelessness. He's actually campaigning on saying that he's going to do something about affordable housing, even though he's one of the main reasons why we have this problem to begin with. He is actually running his campaign saying that this is what he's going to do. So look at this response. We have a systemic issue, not one that has anything to do with a single developer. Okay, might not be a single developer, but let's not wash your hands of this. The lack of affordable housing starts with the permitting process, which is excessively onerous. I cannot get that out. This drives up costs and makes affordable housing projects inherently unaffordable. Couple that with policies enacted by wealthy NIMBYs to keep their communities segregated, and we get no housing built anywhere. Can you believe this, Ron? Rick is going to fight the NIMBYs and cut through the red tape to ensure that we can actually build affordable housing. This is the most insane thing I've ever read.
Well, it's a very long way of saying none. He said, what has he built for affordable housing? None.
He's built none. And so now we're supposed to trust that but it's absolutely insane. He's basically saying it's not his fault because he's a single developer. Although it's not because it's excessively difficult and driving up costs. It's none of these things that he's talking about. For fuck's sake, he got the land for free for the Americana. Free, 15 acres, handed to him with a bow tie.
Yeah, he's not going to fight the NIMBYs. He's going to fight for the NIMBYs.
He's going to fight for, yes.
That's what he's been doing his entire career. So, yeah.
All right. So let's talk about the USC thing real quick.
I think people are kind of anxious to get to the Cenk Uygur.
Well, I think you're anxious to get to that.
All right.
All right. So, covered up sexual assault at USC. This is an actual letter that was an openly published letter that was published by the Trojan Democrats. All right. So we are the Trojan Democrats, the University of Southern California's local organization of Democratic students, a chapter of the College Democrats of America, and the largest student-run political organization at USC. As such, we do not speak on behalf of the university. We write to express our deep concern with Rick Caruso, chair of USC's Board of Trustees, recently announcing his candidacy in the Los Angeles mayoral race. To the utmost possible extent, we urge our allies and friends to refrain from supporting Caruso's bid for mayor for a few key reasons. We cannot in good conscience allow for this campaign to continue without speaking up about Caruso's history, and we feel we have a duty to share our personal experiences with his leadership at USC in order to create a more holistic view of the chairman Caruso. This past fall, USC was rightfully ridiculed for mishandling allegations of sexual assault, abuse, and drugging by members of multiple fraternities at the university. Trojan Democrats joined 8 other organizations in founding USC's Student Coalition Against Sexual Violence and subsequently helped organize protests and meetings with the university's administration. USC's administration under Rick Caruso's leadership has failed to take into consideration our cries for help and demands for accountability of both our school's leaders and the assailants. The reality we see every day on campus is wholly at odds with the fiction in a campus-wide email recently authored by Caruso in which he claims his time on the board brought accountability, responsible leadership, consistent oversight, and effective transparent reporting practices and cultural change to the university. Listen, we can go on and on about this, but no, that is the exact opposite of what he did. He covered up the sexual assaults, basically, in a nutshell.
For 30 years. So this is who this guy is.
So this is who this guy is. I mean, it's just a taste of who this guy is. So the question now is like, how could you possibly know about who this guy is and turn around and put out a tweet that basically says, I'm not getting a $15 minimum wage from Biden. Karen Bass supports Biden.
Has nothing to do
Ergo, Yeah, ergo, I'm going to vote for Caruso now. Like, in what world is Caruso going to give two shits about a $15 minimum wage, let alone any of these other things?
Well, once again, this is a mayoral race, not a federal one, not even a state one. Cenk Uygur's logic makes no sense on multiple levels. First of all, it's like saying, so his big thing against Karen Bass, which by the way, I'm not a fan of Karen Bass. She's a lousy candidate. But his big thing against Karen Bass is, well, she's part of the Democratic establishment. No thanks. And I'm going to vote for Rick Caruso. Well, okay, she is part of the Democratic establishment. You're right. But that's like saying, I'm so tired of the Democratic establishment. I'm not voting for Liz Warren, but I am going to vote for Joe Manchin. Well, wait a second. They're both, but how do you, that doesn't make, he's part of the Democratic establishment too, which in this case, same thing, because now Caruso is proud Democrat. And again, it's technically a nonpartisan office. They're just playing the fiddle to try to win. So it makes no sense on multiple levels. And again, here's the deal. He also said like, oh, Karen Bass is part of the status quo. She'll continue the status quo. Again, this isn't federal or state. This is local. So what is the status quo locally?
Rick Caruso is the status quo.
Exactly, because here's the deal. Here's what happens, and this happens in other cities. This isn't unique to just LA. But here is basically a snapshot of what's been going on. Eric Garcetti has made this city into a developer's playground. And what that means,
I'd say he's made it worse, infinitely worse, but I'd say it even started before then, but carry on. I get your point.
Okay, so he has made it infinitely worse. What they do is they will do things like, okay, there's all these developers and they have their cronies and they'll sell stuff off. They'll be like, hey, you should develop here. Check this out. This is a cool opportunity to whatever oligarch, wherever. And the oligarch says, okay, and they buy some stuff. Then what they do is they use their foot soldiers, aka the police, and they push all the homeless people into that area via sweeps and other brutal, inhumane practices. Then after a while, they go, this neighborhood's not working out for you the way we thought it would. We have no idea why. Gee, shucks, we're sorry. Tell you what, we'll take it off your hands, but we're not going to pay what you paid us. I mean, we can't do that, but we'll take it off your hands. You only lose a little bit. The oligarch says, all right, fine, whatever. So they're out of the picture. The cronies in bed with the mayor, they got their property back. They are already in the green because they just sold it. They bought it back, but paid less for it. Now what do? They get their foot soldiers, aka the police, to push the homeless people somewhere else, and they start developing. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. What do you think Rick Caruso's looking to do?
Well, he's part in, yeah.
Why
no, but
do you think he's
already done that?
Millions and millions of dollars, but now he can do it by himself. He get same reason why Trump wanted to be president. He was tired of doing the purchasing. He wanted to be the guy who gets purchased for a change. Same thing here. He's going to do the exact same thing. Why do you think he spent millions and millions of dollars trying to get a job that pays $300,000 a year? He wants to make it even more of a developer's playground. He is the status quo times 20. He has deeper pockets, and he's even more corrupt than Eric Garcetti, which again, very, very
and
hard.
Far wealthier.
So you have to ask yourself, why would someone like Cenk Uygur, supposed progressive hero Cenk Uygur, why would he support such a candidate? All these terrible things about the guy. He is the establishment you're saying you're trying to go in against. So either Cenk Uygur doesn't know about any of this, which I find hard to believe.
I find that hard to believe.
Let me finish, please. Or Cenk Uygur maybe has some interest coming from developers. And guess what? A developer gave Cenk Uygur a lot of freaking money. Katzenberg is a developer who gave Cenk Uygur millions. And I guarantee that they wouldn't mind seeing someone like Rick Caruso become mayor. So, I mean, this is very deceptive. I'm sorry. Either it is at best completely ignorant of what is going on locally, and it is at worst completely deceptive. And that guy has over 500,000 Twitter followers, and there's going to be some people now who think, well, I guess Rick Caruso's not so bad.
No, he's
and they're going to go out and vote for him, and that's freaking horrible.
I mean, listen, the fact that you cannot give me a single reason as to why you think Rick Caruso is going to be this progressive whatever better than the establishment is the problem. If your only attack is that the Democrats didn't do this, that, or the other, which is true. I'm not in denial over the fact that Biden did walk away from his $15 minimum wage pledge. That is absolutely the case, and it's wrong and it's messed up.
What does that have to do with the mayorship in LA? Besides
nothing, and it doesn't make Rick Caruso the good guy all of a sudden, or the guy that's going to implement the change that we need. The other thing to keep in mind is Costa-Hawkins, right? I know that this was a bill that happened in the 90s, I think 96, 95, even though that seems like it was a long time ago. It sort of was a catalyst for a lot of the things that you're talking about. Costa-Hawkins was a state bill that basically took local municipalities' rights away, right to have rent control and whatnot away from them. So they could no longer do that. The argument that they used was like, we're going to grandfather in all of these old buildings. There's plenty of supply of affordable housing in the market because these exist right now. Those are going to be there. And so we have to have some sort of a carrot to get developers to come in and actually do something about the buildings that aren't being upkept and whatnot. So it was, this argument that they made that there was an existing affordable housing there was plenty of that and we'd be fine. But what happened was unintended consequences. I don't know. Maybe it was intended. What happened is developers bought these old buildings, they tore them down, and they put much bigger buildings in their place. Ergo, no more rent control. So this has happened, wash, rinse, repeat, to the point where there's literally no affordable housing hardly in the city of LA. And the idea that all of these homeless folks are just drunk drug addicts is just false. We know it's false. I've gone out and actually talked to some of these folks. As you know, Ron, I've met students that are enrolled full-time in college, simply can't afford to do the student loans for the housing, the ridiculously high housing, $3,500 a month for an apartment on top of their tuition. Like, people that work, minimum wage jobs, work for Lyft or Uber, can't afford the rents. It's impossible. So there's no way that the guy that created some of the gentrification that have led us to this place and did so willingly and in a greedy manner is going to fix the problem. It's ridiculous.
No, and it's just so, I mean, look.
Anyway,
he represents a special kind of danger. And look, Karen Bass is a lousy candidate. I'm not, I can't really, stick my neck out for Karen Bass by any means. But she does not represent the danger that Rick Caruso does.
No, she does not.
Only developers and people of stake in that have any incentive to want to see Rick Caruso become mayor. So, when you're going to pretend like, oh, he's kind of against the establishment. No. He's against the status quo. He is the establishment. He is the status quo. So if that's your big thing, A, you should have supported Gina Viola in the primary, A. B, which maybe Cenk Uygur did. I don't know. I can't say for sure one way or another. I have no clue. But, or if you're really like that hyper focused on like, oh, well, the establishment, we need a status quo changing thing. Well, then you should just leave it blank. But
yeah, listen,
somebody's going against the status quo and then vote for Rick Caruso.
I agree with you. And this has got nothing to do, like somebody's saying, pearl clutching from the left. You know what? This has got nothing to do with left versus right. If you want to do something about the income inequality, the plutonymy, the divide that is actually this, you're not going to get there by voting for billionaires that are buying this election for a goddamn good reason. He's not doing this because he's full of charity.
No, he wants to just make it an even bigger playground for all of his developer friends.
Yeah.
And that's, and that's why you see people supporting stuff like 4118, which is like meant to just make it easier to brutalize homeless people. And it was sold under the guise of, we're keeping schools safer. Like, this is the corruption that is LA politics. And when you're going to try to downplay, if Rick Caruso does become mayor, I mean,
I don't think it's going to happen, having said that.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not so sure. I mean, Karen Bass is not, I don't think she's all that popular. And, even for people like me who recognize the danger that is Rick Caruso, it's still hard to like muster any enthusiasm for Bass. Right. I mean, I'm going to vote for her. I could never in a million years endorse her. Like, it's like, well, I'm going to vote for her because I know that if I don't, there's a good chance LA will just turn into a strip mall with an ocean, even more than it already is. But
there'll be less affordable housing stock. I don't think that's a crazy claim. All right, let's turn to a video I want to play. So Caruso had a press conference that was basically shut down by some activists. It wasn't a press conference that was open to the public. It was supposed to be for the press, but these activists came, they knew where it was. And one of them got into an altercation with a lobbyist, a real estate development attorney for Meyer Brown that happened to be standing there on the sidewalk. Let's play this video.
Yo, Rick Caruso, young people don't want you to be mayor of LA. Young people don't want you as mayor.
Ain't that right?
Fucking idiot. Hey, why'd you spend $40 million to come in second place, Rick Caruso? Why'd you come in? Why'd you come in second with $40 million? You're a fucking embarrassment. Take your fucking hands off me. How much money did you donate to an anti-abortion group? Huh? How much money did you donate? How much? How much, Rick Caruso? Is it more or less than your $100 million yacht Invictus? Want to talk about the sexual assault allegations at USC? Let's talk about sexual assault allegations at USC. Google George Tyndall. Google George Tyndall. You promised to report on it.
Do me a favor.
No, I'm not doing you a fucking favor. Get the fuck out of here. Hey, Rick Caruso. Rick Caruso. Got anything to say? Got anything to say about your anti-abortion donations? Hey, weren't you a Republican?
How much have you given the anti-abortion cause?
What about your Republican money?
$40 million, you lost the primary.
Fuck your hands up.
$40 million you lost, Rick. You spent $40
Private property.
million.
You spent so much money to come in second. You spent so much money to come in second. We don't want you. We don't want you as mayor of LA, you loser. Fucking moron. You shut the fuck up, Flores. Fuck you, Rick Caruso.
We heard your point. We heard your point. We heard your point.
Fuck you.
We heard your point. Fuck you. Fuck you. We're on a public sidewalk. We heard your point.
It's a public sidewalk.
You got anything to say? How is LAPD funded?
Fuck you.
He doesn't want to talk to voters. He can't answer that question. He can't answer that question. His campaign is full of lies. His
You ran a
campaign is
campaign
full
on
of
deceit.
lies.
You ran a campaign on hate. You're gonna get destroyed by 3 people.
All right.
This is how, I mean, yeah, I know we got to like kind of move on.
I know we got to move on, but what I wanted to talk about this though is, which we didn't play the whole video, but what happens is the lobbyist actually has these 2 activists arrested with a citizen's arrest and has them handcuffed and taken away. I investigated this a little bit further because I was like, why is this guy having these guys arrested from a citizen's arrest? He had claimed that he had been assaulted. That was not the case. What had happened is their phones had hit each other. So that doesn't qualify as assault. So obviously the charges didn't stick. But, then you're like, okay, oh, I see now. He's a real estate development attorney. He's a lobbyist. He's packaged money to half the city council from Mitch O'Phail onward. So, I mean, the corruption is just everywhere in our politics.
It's so messed up. And just to like put a period on it all, like this is what he does as far as his events go. Like his events, usually they're like closed off. It's like $100. Like they'll do these like yacht events where it's like $100 a plate. When protesters show up, they take their phones and rough them up. This guy is not. He is not some non-establishment. He is not some diversion from the status quo. And look, I can't say for sure I know what Cenk Uygur's motivations were behind it, but I think it is so terrible, and it is at best, just completely ignorant on what's going on locally, and
it just doesn't make sense to me. Knowing what Cenk's normal positions have been in the past, it just seems like a strange thing to do. It doesn't make sense. Doesn't seem like it's grounded in anything real.
Well, it's so sad, and like I certainly will always have my disagreements with the guy, but I hope he retracts this. I really do.
I do
don't
too.
think he will, but I hope he does, because I think it's again,
all right,
at best ignorant, at worst deceptive.
Elon Musk. Let's move on to Elon Musk.
My favorite. Good.
What is the Musk speech? We have this video, right? Colin, do we have?
Did Colin bail?
Oh, I don't think there's a video for Elon.
Oh, all right. I thought Ron had sent you a video. All right. So, Ron.
Yes, Tina.
What did you want to say about Elon Musk? Talk to me.
I think it looks like he's gonna get Twitter, right? We have, I think we had an article. It wasn't a video, but we did have the article, right?
Yeah, there's an article.
So for anyone,
go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, like, it looks like Elon Musk is in the process of buying Twitter. Like, unless something goes weird.
Terribly wrong, yeah.
He
was there. There's, you know what the video probably was of him walking into Twitter headquarters yesterday.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he walked into the headquarters and he talked to some people. And, you know,
he said he's going to lay off 75% of the staff. That's a huge chunk of staff members.
Nothing like confirmed. Is he for sure gonna do that? Like he's gonna lay off?
He said he was. Colin, do you have the Reuters article that I sent you? Oh, there's the video. There, Colin, you found it. Yeah. Is that a sink that he's carrying? Why is he carrying a sink? Does anybody know? That's just weird.
Because the joke is let that sink in.
Oh,
get it?
Oh man, I get it now.
I needed Colin to explain that to me. I saw that yesterday and I didn't understand what he was carrying or why. The Reuters article, though, do we have that? Because I think this is really interesting information.
Yeah, some high profile. Yeah, there we go.
Twitter
is losing its most active users.
Internal documents show. So, is Twitter dying? Billionaire Elon Musk mused in April, 5 days before offering to buy the social media platform. That was the first hitch that was in the first deal. He felt that he was overpaying for it because he found out there were all these like bots and fake accounts on there. But we all know going in that that's the case. Everybody that's on Twitter knows that there are troll farms that are active for more than one organization, from our government to other foreign governments, from corporations to individuals that are in media. So that's just part and parcel to the conversation. But what's interesting about this article is they're talking about actual heavy tweeters. So these are a lot of them verified accounts that spend a lot of time on Twitter.
I don't know, man. I mean, look, I'm not an Elon Musk fan for many reasons, but I don't know. Why would you leave Twitter over it? And the reason I pose it that way, like, what social media platform isn't owned by a total jerk? Like what? Like what are you gonna do? Be like, oh, Elon Musk has Twitter. I'm out. I'm gonna go to Facebook where there's a great guy waiting.
Yeah, no,
Mark
I know,
Zuckerberg,
right?
one of a kind. He's the best. Like, I mean, I think bigger picture here, like to talk about it from a theme standpoint, it's kind of frightening. And a colleague of mine, Evan Greer, she tweeted about this. It's really disturbing that we live in a world where you have a platform that is a huge communication vehicle that millions and millions of people use, and this billionaire can just buy it whenever he feels like it. He can just be like, I'm going to buy this now. And then he's going to be like the big free speech guy.
Right.
I mean,
which is ridiculous.
Who knows what his agenda is or isn't? I mean, like he wrote a nice letter, or one of his, probably his publicist or something wrote a nice letter saying, "Oh, I want to facilitate discourse and this and that." Right. But who knows? I mean, he's just a billionaire dude. I mean.
So here's the thing: wealth and power are consolidate each other, right? The more wealth you have, the more you have the ability to consolidate more power. And part of doing that is owning chunks of media, right? Whether it's traditional media, i.e. like a newspaper, whether it's broadcast media, i.e. a cable news station or Sinclair local stations, or what is now, the Agora social media. So it is a public square. It's where things get discussed.
Yeah.
So there is a value to that for a guy that's a billionaire that wants to continue to consolidate power, whether that's because he thinks he's going to be able to make more money by doing so, or whether he's just a narcissist, because a lot of these guys just want to be that guy, right? And I think Elon Musk would definitely fall into that category. I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think it's good for society.
No.
And it's not. This isn't the only example we've seen of this. But anyway, so what's interesting about this article, though, is a lot of the tweeters that have been part and parcel to growing the platform, right? So whether they're journalists, celebrities, whatnot, they would used to come on and they would spend, 2 or 3 tweets a day or whatever on a daily basis. But these are folks that maybe comprise
Twitter, apparently
10% of the 10% of the subscribers or people that have Twitter accounts do 90% of the tweet generating, which is an interesting figure. And those folks are necessary for the platform to thrive, because obviously this is where everybody's coming onto Twitter to read this stuff, right? or to comment on it and to participate in the conversation, so to speak. So if folks do leave, it's a problem for the platform. One of the things that he also said was that he was going to bring Trump back.
Okay. I mean, I don't know. I just hope. It kind of sucks because, I mean, I don't like any of the platforms. And again, I think the true solution should be is they should be nationalized. They should be made public utilities, you know, and they should just follow free speech laws and stuff like that. A billionaire shouldn't be able to buy something that millions of people use as a dominant communication vehicle. Like, that shouldn't be allowed to happen.
But this is part of it. Happens now though because they have so much
all the time.
wealth. Right?
It happens all the time, and there's not policy to stop it because we're in a place where technology has just passed up the law.
A couple of things here, though. I have thoughts on this. The reason these guys have so much money now is because we've been in a cycle of consolidating wealth and power now for, I'd say, 4 decades, right?
Yeah,
and
definitely.
I think that's given them more money to be able to do things like this. I think part and parcel to that is we do have laws that could have prevented this. Antitrust laws. The Department of Justice decided to back away from enforcing those for reasons I will never understand a few decades ago. I think if we had seen a different choice made there with some of these large tech firms back in further in nascent days, this wouldn't necessarily be the case. There'd be more competition. If we had a more robust choice for social media platforms in which that would be not owned by 2 billionaires per se that are deciding what free speech is. So I hear you on the utility thing. I'm not opposed to that. I do think it is an open marketplace of where people go to discuss politics, discuss the news of the day, et cetera, et cetera. And it's important that it doesn't get tainted by what a billionaire decides free speech is, because that's by definition not going to be free speech. It's going to be like, okay, I'm going to shut down union conversation. I don't like unions, or whatever his thing is, minimum wage. No, we don't want to increase that. So let's turn off the algorithm for that so that doesn't get any traction. So there is a danger there, right, of those sorts of things happening.
Well, totally. And in the article, like the one article that we referenced was he did say that he's like, when I say free speech, I mean within the extent of the law, which that's good. I mean, if that's sincere, that sounds great. But
does he?
But, well, not just that. Does he mean that? Which, who knows? But more importantly, like, well, who's going to enforce that? You? Elon?
Yeah.
And if so, what qualifies you to do such a thing? Like, what's the transparency here? What's the process here? And, it is kind of a bummer too, because in my opinion, and this is just like a subjective thing, I suppose, I do think that Twitter, well, they're all very frustrating places to be. I do think that Twitter is the least shitty. Like I
agree with you.
I like Twitter better than Facebook. I like Twitter better than Instagram. I just think Twitter is, I don't want to say the best one because that would imply that any of them are good, but Twitter is the not as bad, comparatively speaking, one. Right. I think there's like a wide range of reasons for that. But and part of it's just like the way the platform.
Part of it's privacy, yeah, and also part of it's been privacy issues, right? Whereas Facebook in the past, and I'm sure they continue to do this today, if they get a subpoena for private information, DMs, whatnot, they don't necessarily let the person know that's the subject of the subpoena, and they hand that over. Whereas Twitter has a policy, if that happens, they contact the person that is the subject of the subpoena, and they give them an opportunity to quash it or to address it before. So here, you have 10 days to do something about this. If you don't in 10 days, then we'll have to comply, sort of a thing. So at least they're trying to actively give some credence to, invasion of privacy rights, right, from the government. So there's many reasons.
They're all vulnerable, but Facebook is worse, significantly worse. They are all vulnerable. We do not have encryption protection on any of them, but Facebook is, I think, the worst out of all of them.
Yeah,
I mean,
Instagram.
Facebook. Yeah, you
same company, so.
Yeah, and Meta. Yeah, it's like all owned by the same. It's pretty intense, but we do have some solutions coming up, or at least
we do. So should we switch into privacy rights stuff? because we've got some
Sure.
privacy right things to discuss.
Yeah, well, I think this is a good time to reiterate, a lot of people with Elon Musk buying Twitter are kind of going like, "Oh man, I gotta delete my DMs. I gotta do this. I gotta do that." Like, and I get it, but in reality, your DMs were always vulnerable. They still are. You don't have
Yeah.
encrypted protection. Fortunately, there is a petition out there to try to change this. You can go to makedmsafe.com. That full URL is makedmssafe.com. This demands full encryption across all social media. You got to be careful with what you're saying on social media. Facebook hands over private DMs to law enforcement on the daily, and it's usually around people trying to make abortion decisions and stuff like that. So it ain't a good thing that's going on, folks.
Yeah. No, I read something about that. That's frightful.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, some people they're good about using encrypted things like Signal and stuff like that, but not everyone's hip to that stuff. So we got to try to protect folks better. MakeDMSafe.com, MakeDMSsafe.com. If you're kind of
this would be legislation. Would this be legislation that would require?
Yeah, it would be a law that everything has to follow encryption. This doesn't solve all of our big tech problems, but this is a huge thing that would help people. And you should be concerned just from a thematic standpoint, and put aside what you feel about Elon Musk one way or another. I know neither of us are fans. A lot of people aren't. But putting that aside, it should concern you that some random billionaire, no matter who it is, could just buy up a platform like this, and your DMs are just freaking vulnerable. They're just out there. So this is something that starts fighting back on that. Again, makedmsafe.com.
It's bad for our democracy. That's what's, and we can have that conversation. Exactly.
It's the opposite of
democracy. If we're trying to establish a stronger democracy, because we have been losing that, I think it's pretty much maybe in the coffin already, but I might be charitable by saying that.
I think you're being very charitable. I think I someday hope to share your optimism. I think the coffin's been cremated already. I think it's a couple ashes flying around in the ocean right now. But I hope you're right. I really do.
No, I don't think I am right. I just try to be optimistic about these things, because if not, what else do we have? Listen, I think, not having billionaires buying up our democracy would be great. It'd
be a cool first step.
It would be a great first step. And this is where we've been at now for a while. And it's just alarming. And so few people seem to be dialed into what's happening.
So,
all right.
First of all, I'll do a couple other quick digital rights plugs before we move on. But also, I want to tell everybody, smash that like button. Smash it. Did you smash it? You got to smash it. And feel free to leave a super chat. We will get to all your super chats at the end, and that helps keep this show on the air. So smash the like button, super chat it up. And I'm going to make another plea for you. I really am, because the midterms are coming up, and we are in a rough spot when it comes to a lot of things going on in digital rights, especially with net neutrality. Joe Biden still, and it's not Joe Biden. I mean, it's in the Senate now too. They still have not confirmed Gigi Sohn. Now, we talked about this last week on the show, but with the election coming up, it's really important to highlight what is super time sensitive with elections. So Gigi Sohn, pro-net neutrality FCC appointee, was appointed months ago. Now, it took almost a year for Joe Biden to bring up his nominee, which is very rare. Trump had his approved within a couple weeks. Trump had a totally unqualified guy, Nathan Symington, confirmed within a couple weeks. He confirmed Ajit Pai a few years back before that. Joe Biden took almost a year to be like, okay, I'll do this. I don't really want to, but the Bernie task force made me promise. And Senate still hasn't acted on it. Why? Because
I don't know.
Well, the big tech industry wants to appoint their own person. That's what's going on. And Gigi Sohn,
regulatory capture is the thing.
The regulatory capture, exactly. So they want to appoint their own person, and Democrats are being passive about it. Chuck Schumer doesn't want to act on this, and Joe Biden doesn't really care either. The dude started his campaign with a bunch of Comcast execs. So we gotta force them to do this, because guess what? If she's not approved by the end of the year, they got to re-up her nomination, which they might not even do. This is history, folks. We don't have a functioning FCC, and we know that the internet service providers have already pushed their luck. We covered last week on the show a story where a study revealed that 38 cities in the United States, they're doing things where they're charging different neighborhoods the same money for internet, but the poorer, less white neighborhood is getting poorer service than the richer, more white neighborhood. They're paying the same price. They're getting worse service. The big cable companies are doing that because it saves them money and they know they can get away with it in a world without federal net neutrality. So we're up against a lot, folks, but you got to go to battleforthenet.com, demand that action be taken on Gigi Sohn immediately. And you brought up antitrust, Tina. There are 2 bills floating around Congress right now that starts chipping away at big tech. 2 solid antitrust bills. We've been talking about it on the show for a while now. There is a new petition to demand that Biden take action on that during the lame duck session and make it a priority. You can go to bidenpromise.us. Can you pull that up, Colin? It is bidenpromise.us. You can go there and you can demand that they act on these antitrust bills that are extremely popular, by the way. Tell President Biden, don't cave to big tech. You can sign that right now to demand they take action during the lame duck. We got to throw some Hail Marys because a midterm's coming up, folks. It's coming up soon. And there's a lot to be very frustrated about. We covered some of it today.
And this would benefit everybody, everybody, literally, no matter where you are in the political spectrum, you would be benefited by having antitrust laws actually enforced at this point. It's wild, though. If they had done this, I've been talking about this for a while too, but they've been done this, 20 years ago, would have been helpful. It would have deterred also the media consolidation. It's not just in big tech. It's across the board. And these things do affect your daily life, whether it feels like it does or not, they affect you.
I mean, the last time we had real antitrust legislation was when they broke up AT&T. And it's like, we both remember the days when a long distance phone call cost an arm and a leg. And, we didn't have inventions like the answering machine. Well, that was because...
let alone a cell phone.
Right. Well, and some of it's just technology moving along. But a big part of it, too, was like we had a monopoly on the phone lines. And then they broke up AT&T and long distance calling became way more affordable because there was competition. Things like the answering machine came into existence, things like the modem. So it helped build the internet as we know it today. I'm sure the internet probably would have happened regardless. I'm pretty certain. But antitrust legislation helped bring it about. So, these people who make it out like, oh, antitrust legislation goes against innovation. The opposite is true.
It
allows innovation to happen. If we don't have antitrust legislation in the tech world now, we're not going to know what the next competitor to Amazon or Google is going to be because there's not going to be one because it won't be possible for one to happen.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. All right. So is that everything for our privacy section? I think it is, isn't it? Looking at my notes here. All right. So this week on Right Wing Insanity Report, obviously, I am talking with local journalist James Stout about American Guard and a few other groups. But before we get to that,
about the bumblebees, folks.
For people that did not see that opening video, they're probably like, what are you talking about?
Did you miss the opening video? Are you wondering what the hell's a bumblebee? You'll find out.
You'll find out. I did want to mention that we had a member call scheduled for tonight, but Jordan is sick, so the member call is not happening tonight. Put it on your calendar for next Tuesday, 7 p.m. So not tonight, next Tuesday. Put that down. And then I want to switch to, sometimes on the Right Wing Insanity Report, I go through weekly Right Wing Insanity videos, right? These are things that pop up that you just watch this and you have a good chuckle or you kind of go like, what did I just watch, right? And there just doesn't seem to be a dearth of these videos, Ron. But this week, I'm going to do them with you. And I think this will be fun because you are a comedian and you always come up with these funny things to say.
All right, let's
So you ready to do this?
I'm ready.
All right. First one is going to be, who remembers Michelle Bachmann?
Oh, I remember her. Who else can answer, by the way? You're like, who remembers Michelle? I guess Colin can answer. Colin, do you remember Michelle Bachmann?
Right.
She's Minnesota, right? She's Minnesota.
Yes. So I want to play this surfaced clip that Michelle Bachmann had something to say about the founding fathers and the Bible.
There is no question. It isn't even debatable The number one book that was referenced by the founders across the board when they're putting this nation together was the Bible. A distant second was the great French philosopher Montesquieu, then the English philosopher John Locke, and others. But it was the Bible. In fact, you can take the Declaration of Independence apart and you can find scripture for almost every portion. The Constitution, scripture for almost every portion. Because these were some of the most brilliant geniuses ever assembled. And they wanted to get it right. They weren't perfect, but they wanted to get it right. And they sought the Lord. And this is the document they came up with.
Okay, so Ron.
So first,
not the 18th, none of the 18th Enlightenment authors that they actually did reference. Locke, Kant, none of those guys. The Bible. Is she serious?
Bible. Well, first of all, that is not true.
No, it's not true. It's not even remotely true.
Close to being true. And second of all, even if it was true, which again, it is not, and it is far from it, our quote-unquote founding fathers, who, by the way, didn't find anything, but our quote-unquote founding fathers, you know, they were like in their early 20s. It was basically a fraternity house, and they had slaves, and they would solve their problems by walking a couple paces and turning around and shooting guns at each other. Let's abandon the idea that they walked on water, folks, because guess what? They freaking didn't. And guess what? All those documents that they made, they were meant to be changed and evolved with time. Maybe that's the advice we should take from them and evolve these documents instead of like putting them on some pedestal when they were written by a bunch of slave owners who did not actually reference the Bible. But
no, there's
cool story.
It's a wild claim. It's such a wild claim. I mean, if anything, so 18th century Enlightenment, I mean, at least she does mention Locke. I was like, okay, phew, she got Locke in there because Locke is definitely all over his hands are all over the Constitution. But beyond that, the principle of religious tolerance requires that there is no religion. It's freedom from religion as well. You cannot have religious tolerance if you're prefacing one religion over another, and they understood that. So I don't know. I thought that was a really wild claim. So wanted to share that one.
You are such a lovable nerd with what you just said there. Like, at least she mentioned Locke. I was like, woo. I was so relieved. You're probably like the only person on the planet who actually had that reaction. And I've read Locke too. I mean, I'm a nerd too. Like I'm not like, this is not, I don't mean it in the derogatory, but that's just like, oh, she mentioned Locke at least. Thank goodness. I was about to send an email, but she threw in Locke. I mean, she's getting a point or two. Not much, because she's wrong about the Bible thing. That's not what happened.
No, that's definitely not what happened. That definitely not. All right. So Nick Fuentes, I've talked about him on the show multiple times now because he's constantly all of a sudden in the news cycle. He is the founder of America First, which is a far right, I'm going to call it sort of neo-Nazi white nationalist organization that has been.
You don't say, and they're called America First? No way.
Yeah. So, and he's been having these American First conferences at the same time as CPAC at a close location. And, you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene has attended and whatnot. So he's been getting more attention for all of these reasons.
Are they like, is CPAC like not hardcore enough for them?
No, it's not. It's not.
Oh,
okay, Ron, here's the reality. No, it's not.
Hmm.
These are folks that, CPAC is child play to them, as crazy as that might sound. And people that have seen some CPAC videos, they're pretty extreme conservatives, right? These are not your run-of-the-mill business guys. They're not conservative enough yet, because this is how extreme things are becoming out there. So this is a alert on this one, because it's really one of the most offensive things that I've ever played on the show. But I think we need to be aware of this stuff. There is an increasing amounts of anti-Semitism out there in a very emboldened way. We have these banner drops going on. We have flyering going on. And there's more and more of it happening in the country. So with that in mind, and also Kanye, saying the things that he said.
Wait, what did he do? I'm kidding. Yeah,
I'm like, what? How did you miss that? All right. So full disclosure on this one, it's bad. All right, Nick Fuentes.
They hate Jesus. If you hate Jesus, you have a problem with me. Newsflash, and every Christian, this should be the mantra. If you hate Jesus, you have a problem with Christians. Straight up. Don't tell me religious Jews or whatever. Question, do you hate Jesus? Because if you do, that's a problem. That's a big problem. It's especially a big problem if you have any influence whatsoever. If you hate Jesus and you have influence, it's my job that you don't have influence anymore. Because I'm a real Christian. I'm not just one of these, hey, believe whatever you want. Our job is to save souls and get people to heaven and fight the devil. So don't tell me they're entitled to their religion. If their religion involves my Lord in hell, then they can get the fuck out of America, frankly. Insofar as that's your belief, then you have no business being here. Certainly have no business being anywhere near the levers of power if you believe that. Because who do you serve if you don't serve Jesus Christ? You serve the devil. You serve Satan. Oh, I'm anti-Semitic? Yeah, whatever. You can call me whatever you want. You hate Jesus. Your opinion doesn't matter to me. Call me whatever you want. Do you believe in God? Oh, okay. Opinion discarded. Opinion thrown in the garbage and pissed on. Oh, I'm anti-Semitic? Yeah, I piss on your Talmud. You think I'm anti-Semitic? You think I care what Antichrist believes?
That is the diatribe from a guy who just found out that the Cheesecake Factory was out of ranch dressing. That was his reaction when they told him that. I do love the decor though. He's leaning up against a pumpkin. He's like, look, I'm up against this symbol from a pagan holiday, and I'm here to talk to you about my religious beliefs that I think are superior to everything else. If you don't believe, there's 3,000 gods. I picked one of them, and I nailed it. I got it right.
So he went on to say in this video that all the Jews need to leave America, straight up. So, but you know, what I want to frame for this is that when he says, if you don't believe in Jesus, you believe in Satan. So he's basically saying Jewish people are all satanic worshipers. That's basically what he's saying.
Yeah, no, it's terrible what he's saying. I mean, it's frightening that anyone would take this guy remotely seriously.
He has a growing audience,
Sure.
Ron. People do take him seriously. You know, and I think the other thing I want to really kind of hammer home right now is that a lot of these guys are very much turning to religion. Christianity is becoming part and parcel to a lot of their extremist beliefs. And I've seen, you know, Telegram chats pop up now that are basically Nazi Christian groups, where there's one called Aryan Church. That's literally the name of this Telegram. Yeah. So these guys are very much becoming more radicalized in their religious beliefs and their Christian religious beliefs. Sort of think about, you know, some of the things that Mel Gibson used to say, except make it like 20 times worse. That's sort of where this is headed. So
but this guy's sober. Mel was at least drunk.
Yeah, fair.
Remember when he afterwards? He's like,
after he was arrested
for healing.
Totally fair. All right, you're hilarious, man. All right, so
but joking aside, though, I mean, we do.
Yeah, it's frightful.
Like when you look at all the warning signs of fascism,
they're here.
Every box. Like
we have checked every box, Ron.
Every box, and we check it well. Like it's not like, well, there's a vague little. It's just like, oh no, that's freaking right in the face. And you know, like extreme nationalism, you know, extreme xenophobia. Clinging to religious narratives, you know, to try to, you know, expel the other. That's all on the list. That's all the list. A disdain for the arts, a disdain for, you know, I mean, it's like we check every freaking box and we check it well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, this guy should not be taken seriously anywhere.
He is taken seriously, and he has quite a large audience. Listen, this should scare everybody. The fact that he has full conferences happening at the same time as CPAC, full conferences that are being well attended by not only attendees of CPAC, but also the politicians.
But do you think maybe some people just tune in for the pumpkin? I mean, I think... I mean, maybe some people, they're just... I mean, it's so funny. He's leaning up against a Halloween decoration as he's giving it. He's like, you worship Satan.
All right, that is pretty funny, actually. Yeah, but Halloween's no longer about Satan, yo. It's about... I don't know. Jesus.
It's about Jesus now. Man, now you're bringing up. So I went to a Catholic school when I was younger, and they did. When we did Halloween, there was a line on like how scary you could be. Like you could go ghost. All right, we'll let that slide. Maybe, but like witch or Satan, no, that crossed the line. And if you wanted to cross that line, well, you could outside of school, but in school you had to like be a Jesus character. Like you had to be like a saint or like someone dressed up as Mary, like the mom or whatever. You could tell I'm an atheist by the way I call them characters and I say the mom or whatever. But I had 12 years of that stuff, folks. It was it was drilled in there.
Yeah, there it is. All right. So Roger Stone has an opinion on Kanye West. Do we want to know what it is?
I feel like we have to now. I mean, you can't just leave that hanging.
No. All right, let's play that video.
As far as President Donald Trump, I'm virtually certain he is going to run again. I still think it is possible that he could announce his candidacy before this November's election, just weeks from now. It's just a guess on my part. I've heard some intriguing ideas today about a Donald Trump, Kanye West ticket. I think maybe Kanye should run for president to kind of prove himself in that arena so he can be selected for vice president.
I'm glad he wears a shirt with his name on it in case anyone is confused. Is that his members only shirt?
I'm guessing that. Okay, so the Proud Boys sold a T-shirt that said Roger Stone did nothing wrong.
That's probably what he's wearing.
I think that's what he's wearing. Couldn't quite see enough of it to determine that was 100% the case, but yeah.
So he might have paid. Man, how much of a narcissist are you if you pay for a shirt with
that has your name on it?
Now they might have gifted it to him. The Proud Boys say, "Hey, man, we're simpatico. Here's this dumb shirt we made."
Right.
And then he's like, "Oh, thank you. I'm gonna wear this on my members live stream where I have man, I couldn't tell all the books on his shelf. Were there books on that shelf? I think they might have all just been DVDs. But
I don't know.
Could you imagine?
I did notice up beyond the Trump's sign
the
there.
Trump
All right.
and the Reagan poster.
The Trump and the Reagan poster, 100%. All right, so now here's some more disturbing information about Kanye. So his last album that came out was apparently going to be called something other than Ye. It was going to be called something else. I'm not going to spoil it for you and tell you what it is. Let's just play the video.
We needed more pointers or steps to know what the talking points for the movement was.
Right.
We had OGs. I feel like Kanye is the leader of a generation who looks up to him, who about retweets and likes and engagement. And there's no OG knowledge in there. There's no political education.
But here's the problem, Todd Libman. I agree with you 100%, but he goes and caters to that audience.
Right.
See, I could agree with you. I swear to God, I 1,000,000% agree with you, but then he'll go, and I swear to God, as a brother, as a black man, as a fellow artist in hip hop, I reached out to John Monopoly, I'm saying names. I reached out to Steve Rifkin, I'm saying names.
Right.
Who I actually see him around. And I'm like, I think it's time he sit down with me. Because of the platform I got, we're on Revolt TV. You know what I'm saying? We're trying to be revolted.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? We're trying to go outside the box.
Oh, really?
And I'm trying to see, this is why we're
Let's
here.
see, let's see.
And it doesn't see. And then this is crazy because I heard a rumor. This is how much I think he's being a troll. I heard a rumor that Yeezy album, that Ye album, its original name was Hitler.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I do know, like, I've
I mean, if it was, but wait though, Nori. If it was, what does that say to you? Okay, because there's a number of ways to talk about what Kanye does. Because he's a disruptor.
So, and just to clarify, CNN actually verified this through multiple other sources, and they had an article that came out today about this.
Can you imagine being in the picture for that? Like, can you imagine, like, because like there's probably like some executives or something that no matter how bogus of an idea Kanye West has, they got to go along with it. So can you imagine, like, they're all just sitting there, Kanye, what are you thinking about calling the album? And he's like, are you sitting down? I got you. This is going to blow your mind. You ready for this? I want to call the album Hitler, and then they're just like, well, we'll run it by the focus group, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's gonna fly.
Do you have any backups? I was thinking maybe Goebbels as a second.
I'm laughing because what else are you gonna do? It's so ridiculous.
What about a different direction, Kanye?
What the hell, man? Like, what is going on with this guy?
Well, so is it legit? Like he, for real, like CNN verified that he did in fact want to do that?
And in fact, there were 2 other videos I watched earlier today too. So none of them are first from him, but they're all people that heard him say this apparently. So when you have like 6 people saying the same thing, it's probably true.
Yeah, I mean, I do think the guy is not well, but I mean,
does that explain something?
No,
like
it doesn't. It doesn't excuse everything. I'm not saying.
No, not excuse. Explain. I mean, is it enough to really explain why you would go down this dark path?
I don't know. I mean,
I don't
maybe
either.
like I mean, I just don't know what it is, and maybe he's just trying to be some like weird provocateur. But I think it's one of those things where it's like something's not right with him, because it's like that's
what's happening. This is what's happening. So it might start off being an edgelord thing, like I'm going to be edgy. I'm going to say some marginally not okay things because it's edgy. Then I'm going to be ironic. Like there's a path that these folks take, but eventually you start believing the bullshit, right? And I think a lot of people that have been, to use their parlance, not mine, have been red pilled from normies to neo-Nazis or whatever. I mean, there's a path that's being taken, and I've seen it happen with, I know you call these guys activists or whatever, people committed to, first just being a Trump supporter, and then, okay, now I'm going to join the Proud Boys. Okay, now this isn't hardcore enough. I'm going to leave the Bumblebees and go join, the Vinlanders or whatever. But to see this sort of thing happening with higher stature, more known individuals is kind of wild.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's because I remember, and I'm sure you remember, I mean, the Kanye West who said George Bush doesn't care about black people.
Yeah, where's that guy?
And I think it is, I think sometimes, especially in the, clickbaity, fly-by-night world we live in, and like the increasingly tribal, hyper tribal world we live in, where it's like you're either on Team A or Team B, and nuance be damned, no matter what the topic is.
Right.
I think you get people where it's like, it's one thing if you're being contrarian because you're sticking your neck out for something that you really believe to be right and just. And then it's a whole other thing if you're just being contrarian for the damn hell of it.
Right.
Those are two different
right.
things. And I think sometimes people don't realize where that line is. And I think at other times there were people who at one point were on one side of the line where it's like, no, we're not trying to be contrarian or not. We're just saying what we feel is right and just. And we're going to go against the grain if we feel
when it makes sense. Yeah.
When it makes sense. But then they get to the point where it's like, well, we just have to always go against the grain. And it's like, 2 + 2 is 4. If someone on MSNBC says 2 + 2 is 4, I'm not going to start believing that 2 + 2 is 5.
It's 5. Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, it's like 2 + 2 is still in fact 4. And I think that's the freaking difference. And I think to kind of tie it to Kanye, I think he's in that latter territory where it's just like he's being contrarian just for the hell of it. He's being a provocateur, and how much of it is deliberate and calculated, and how much of it is like this guy just like something's wrong.
I don't know.
I have no idea.
It's disturbing nonetheless. It's inexcusable. It's disturbing, and it's happening, and it's not just him. So, which is why we're paying attention to these things. All right, so we have a super chat. Double K, thank you, 1999. We appreciate that. It keeps the show going. Thank you, Double K. And on that note, we're going to switch over to my interview with James Stout for Right Wing Insanity Report.
And don't forget, we got to let folks know, you're going to find out if you missed the Bumblebee thing earlier, you're going to find out what that is. And is it okay if I plug my tour dates before we switch over
to the interview? Sure.
Yeah. So folks, I will be on January 28th. I will be in Tucson, Arizona. It's not just a stand-up show. It's going to be the debut screening of my short film Loner. It's a short film, only 12 minutes long. You can get tickets now. And if you get them early, which means before mid-November, you can use the promo code Lucy at checkout and you get a discount on tickets. It's an early bird special. So grab them now, ronplacone.com. February 17th, 18th, I'll be in San Diego, and I'll be announcing more tour dates soon. But you can get all those tickets at ronplacone.com. And follow me on Twitter at Ron Placone. Catch me here on Thursdays at Ron Placone. And, catch my podcast, Get Your News On with Ron, wherever you get your podcasts, and on my YouTube, which, again, is just Ron Placone.
Just Ron. All right. And then I am actually going to be covering the Bernie Sanders rally with Karen Bass this evening here in Los Angeles. So I'll be posting some clips from that. So if you guys are interested in that, we'll probably have some up on Status Coup within the next few days. All right. So on that note, let's turn to my interview with James Stout. Please stay and watch and enjoy. I'm Tina-Desiree Berg reporting for Status Coup News. This week on Right Wing Insanity Report, I am going to be speaking with an investigative journalist from San Diego that works on covering right-wing extremism. You have seen his articles in The Nation, The Appeal, National Geographic, and some others. But let me introduce James Stout. Welcome to Right Wing Insanity Report.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I wanted to talk about some groups that maybe some folks haven't really heard of before, but are definitely out there doing their thing, have been around for the last few years. The first one I want to talk about is American Guard. American Guard was at Charlottesville. Their founder, Brian James, has a history of being associated with other Nazi movements like Hammerskin, the Vinlanders, whatnot. And he calls himself a constitutional nationalist, which is kind of a strange term. You've got an active chapter of American Guard, though, down there in San Diego. I believe they're the Southern California chapter in general. But talk to me a little bit about American Guard and who they are.
Yeah. So, like in San Diego, we have this sort of certain number, and they're fairly self-identified, right? Like that's not like a sort of OSINT thing. That's them posting on their website saying who they are thing. And like, yeah, they claim this sort of constitutional nationalism. They have this it's kind of interesting. Like they have a national congress made up of representatives of the states and like an executive committee and stuff. But I think by their estimates, their membership is in the hundreds, which I think is these groups tend to overestimate their membership and certainly overestimate their active membership, right? I can think of it's less than a dozen people I can name who are part of the group, but they certainly had more people than that at Charlottesville, right? They were, so there's a tweet which I'm sure you can link in the show notes or what have you that shows them arriving at Charlottesville.
Yeah, we do have that. Let's show the video. We do have that.
Nobody cares about your opinion. Put on a fucking burqa. You're gonna dress like a whore. Find that male relative and get him to take you home.
Black lives, they matter.
White Sharia whore.
Black lives, they matter.
Black lives do not matter.
Shut up. Hey, don't engage.
Zimmerman did nothing wrong.
Look at the diversity over there.
Oh, it's fucking great.
Really about
So that's the video of them arriving in Charlottesville. You also see some American Vanguard guys there and some others. Indiana chapter, I believe that was the original chapter.
Yeah, they seem to have been like roughly sort of coterminous with Donald Trump's presidency, right? Like starting in 2016 and then growing in 2017, and probably, if I had to guess, like peaking like around Charlottesville, and like a lot of these groups then kind of atomizing a little bit afterwards. Like I don't see much national discourse about them, but they sort of combine some of this more like sovereign citizen type stuff, I would say, with a lot of sort of more hard right, like white nationalists. I know the ADL calls them hardcore white supremacists.
Oh, they definitely are. So Brian James, who's the founder, was a Hammerskin. He's also been associated with the Proud Boys. I've seen him in multiple photos wearing Proud Boys shirts. We do have a video, Brian James, talking about what he defines constitutional nationalism is. So let's play a little bit of that.
Hi, I'm Brian James, National President of the American Guard. We've decided to do a series of position statements here at the American Guard to get our positions down on record and let the public know more about American constitutional nationalism. We're going to start by going through most of the Bill of Rights first, before moving on to other social and political issues. I'm going to speak to you today about the Second Amendment. The text of the Second Amendment reads, "A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." When we sat down and laid out what would later become the ideological platform for the American Guard, we prioritized a list of issues that we wanted to focus on. After completing the list, we tried to arrange them in order of priority, and the Second Amendment came out on top. The reason for this being that the right to defend ourselves and enforce the will of the people against tyrants with arms is the only reason we can even seriously discuss other issues and rights. Unarmed populations are completely at the mercy of their rulers. They can debate issues and ask for change, but they have no way to realistically make it happen. If they push too hard, they can be easily slaughtered, and have been many times throughout our history. Our founding fathers had just fought a successful rebellion when they wrote the Second Amendment. They wrote it with that in mind. Not hunting, not target shooting, not even home defense. They knew the population needed to be armed to a level where it could defend itself against all threats, foreign and domestic. The cost of giving up the right to bear arms can be seen in the slaughter of tens of millions of civilians under communist and fascist regimes during the last 100 years, immediately after the people were disarmed. As tragic as the current individual acts of violence that spark calls for gun control certainly are, we always have to remember that genocide and enslavement may very well be the alternative.
Yeah.
Genocide and enslavement of who, Brian?
Yeah.
Once again, we see a white supremacist. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. No, it's just, it's always like, yeah, this is the standard sort of Second Amendment discourse, right? That like, like it's either the Khmer Rouge or the Second Amendment, and the only thing that stops us from being, Pol Pot Amendment. But we generally have not seen these groups stand up and talk about, for instance, when young black men are legally carrying firearms and are killed by law enforcement, right? Oddly, that discourse doesn't extend to some people. You don't see them joining with black militias, like No Fucking Around crew, right? Like it's a sort of, he's not saying all the things, I guess.
No, he's not saying all that. What he's implying, in my opinion, is what the genocide he's talking about is what every Nazi is worried about: white genocide. It's not actual genocide as how we would define it, of the slaughter of a group of people like you've seen in the Holocaust or other places. So he's a hardcore.
Yeah. But if for some reason you feel like you want to leave, and you want to run with Enrique and the Bumblebees and Proud Boys and this is what I'm telling you. The Proud Boys is splitting. And the real Proud Boys are leaving the Proud Boys and not calling themselves Proud Boys anymore. Do you guys understand that? I know that's hard for you to understand as new guys, and trust me, I'm not talking down to you. It's just, I'm trying to be clear and factual with you guys. What's going on.
He's a hardcore neo-Nazi, Brian James. So let's pull up the ADL definition of American Guard so folks can see some photos here of what we're talking about. So again, started, as you mentioned, in 2017 around the Trump period. I thought it was interesting you mentioned the way they have their organization set up with their own, what is it, an internal Congress? You described that?
Yeah, so here's another video actually where he speaks about that. And he talks about, they have a national congress with representatives from I believe they call them clubs, but they're like chapters. So some states will have more than one, some states will have one, and then those, and they call them Congress people, right? But they vote in a Congress. I'm guessing online. I don't think this is like a physical, they don't go to DC and meet. And then they have an executive. It's all like, I guess it seems to be roughly sort of based on like a sort of unicameral sort of constitutional, which is, of course, they talk about being constitutional nationalists, so that would make sense. And then they have an executive comprised of him, and I'm not sure who else, and I'm not sure how any of that works, or even if any of that works, right? If much this is largely performative. But yeah, that's their theoretical structure, at least.
Meaning performative, that in theory this is what they've created, but who knows if they actually abide by it this way. So I know he had some videos that he released about the organization. But let's take a look at the ADL website, Colin. Can we put that up for a second? So hardcore white supremacists. So again, started 2017 in Indiana. If you scroll down, this is their logo. It says "Come and Take It" on it. It has the two cleavers crossed. So again, they started. Cannon, right? Yeah, that is a cannon on top.
Yeah.
So, Brian James's background before that was the Vinlanders, which is a neo-Nazi organization. A few had somewhat sinister appearances, it says, such as the marcher who wore Vinlander sunglasses and sported a racial holy war tattoo on the side of his head. So some of those guys have carried over into this organization, I would imagine. Yeah. Then it says, even a cursory examination of the American Guard, however, suggests that its deliberately innocuous self-description may not be accurate. The group's logo, for example, prominently displays two crossed meat cleavers, while members frequently use images of actor Daniel Day-Lewis in his role as Bill the Butcher in the movie Gangs of New York. Bill the Butcher was a fictionalized version of William Poole, the leader of the Bowery Boys, a violent street gang in New York City, infamous for its attacks on immigrants. So, again, we have that anti-immigration theme going. And then Brian James, I want to talk to him specifically for a second. The Southern Poverty Law Center also has them categorized as a hate group, which is understandable. So basically his background is Vinlander Social Club and Hammerskin Nation. We actually had somebody on the podcast 2 weeks ago who was next Hammerskin, and he's now working as an exit specialist trying to help other neo-Nazis leave the movement. Mm-hmm. But that's a pretty hardcore organization. Yeah,
I'm not super duper familiar with them, but yeah, they're pretty serious stuff. And like, it's not to see people from that side of things present a more present that ideology in a way which is more palatable to like American traditionalism, right? Like if like instead of like using the symbology of fascism or Nazism, which some of them, as you said, still do, it's presenting it in like coaching up in a flag and the Constitution, but then still holding these same hardcore like white supremacist, anti-immigrant ideologies kind of at the center, right? But sort of wrapping it up in a more palatable fashion for Americans. It's not uncommon, and like perhaps this will let us also maybe segue into something else I've written about, which is the League of the South and the Sons of Confederate Veterans. But it's not uncommon to see these white supremacist ideas which are objectionable because of the aesthetic as because of their content to a lot of people. So wrapping them up in American symbols, right, like the Constitution, the flag, the Texas flag in this case, right, the come and take it thing, it makes them more palatable to people who might agree at the base with many of the things that the Vinlander Social Club or other like white supremacist movements were espousing, and much of the sort of ideology that they have, but they've found like the the aesthetic of fascism to be objectionable because they're raised in a country that obviously went to war with fascists, also had fascists in it, but you know what I mean? Like they've consumed American popular culture for their whole life, so it's too big of a leap from GOP to Vinlander Social Club, and I think sometimes this is a more like it's not a kind of gentler white nationalism, but it is a better marketed white nationalism, I think.
Right. So, in fact, I know that Brian James was saying he was trying to distance himself from that and that he had changed, but I don't see indication that that's the case. I mean, his current telegram is absolutely chock full of, very racist verbiage. So I think that is exactly who this guy is, regardless. How active is American Guard now? I know that they were also present, for example, at the Million MAGA March, where we had multiple stabbings. That was a lot of Proud Boys there. How active are they out now, though?
It's not something I've covered recently, just because most work is international now, and so I'm focusing more on stuff outside the US. But I haven't seen anything in San Diego. But then the only time I would really run into them would be in like a large, in the context of BLM protests and this sort of, I don't know what to call it, the anti-BLM movement that emerged in San Diego, in 2020, right? So that would be where I would run into them, and I haven't seen them, but then I haven't really been events, right? Which is
the rallies have been fewer and far between. I also would think that in your neck of the woods, I mean, inland San Diego, around the Santee area, Alpine, etc., there are multiple white supremacist organizations that are active there, including the Peckerwoods. So I would imagine that there's some sort of crossover between some of these groups in that area.
Yeah, I'm sure that that wouldn't surprise me. Again, Peckerwoods is something that I've thought about, but I've never really written about. So I don't want to say that I speak with authority on them. But if we look at the sort of tiering, I don't really know where the Peckerwoods fit. I don't know a lot about them. But we have this group called Defend East County. We have this group called Exile Patriots. And both of those are groups.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
Exiled Patriots. That was a newer group that came out of Defend East County, is my understanding, or
so best I can understand it, there was a leadership discussion, did sort of a fracture right between this guy Michael Forzano, who runs Exile Patriots, and this guy Justin Haskins, who runs Defend East County. I'm not quite sure what the basis of the discussion was about, but much of the messaging of both groups seemed to be it sort of, in a way, took a lot of energy out of their movement, and we saw the same thing happen with BLM, right? Instead of beefing with the people who they were supposed to be beefing with, they're beefing with each other, which is fine.
Yeah.
And
that happens.
It does, and it tends to happen. It's sort of these hyper macho kind of right wing groups a lot, right? You see it all over the right, and so they split, and people tended to be in one, not both. It's hard for me to say which was more serious and which was more dangerous, but both certainly sometimes both of them would make videos that looked to me like direct threats, and were pretty troubling, and I've covered them a bit, and there's a great article in the Union Tribune by Andrew Dyer if people want to look that up too. They again have kind of petered out. Haskins, who runs Defend East County, lives in Yuma, which is in Arizona if people aren't familiar, as opposed to East County, San Diego, of course. And so I think with his sort of relocation full-time to Yuma, that's kind of petered out. They also sort of probably are something of a success story of deplatforming, in that they got they went from Defend East County to DEC to Befriend East County to they had to rebrand every time they were banned. Every time they were banned, they lost momentum, right?
Right.
I think when we're talking about these two groups, the thing that we should talk about, and I don't think it's representative, just to be clear, of the degree of violence that the whole group was committed to. But there were people within that group, and that tends to be how these things work, right? You have a big group and people who are more committed to violence within that group. There's one person who is named Gray Zamudio, who was arrested by the feds in May of 2020, or August of 2020, as part of a federal case against a group that they called Shadow Moses, that called themselves Shadow Moses. It's an interesting case. I found it on Pacer, and it consisted of himself and then a sheriff's deputy in Georgia, right? And the group was stockpiling automatic weapons, explosives, ammunition.
Okay.
The sheriff's deputy had an automatic weapon. So if people aren't familiar, that's when you hold down the trigger and it keeps shooting, as opposed to you have to pull the trigger every time you want to shoot. That he'd removed the serial number from, so trying to make it a gun that's less traceable.
A ghost gun, yeah.
Yeah, effectively, like ghost guns are often used to mean like various homemade guns, but it's the same thing, right? It goes into the untraceable firearms, or unserialized firearms is a broad category that includes that, right? So he has claimed they basically, when the feds arrested Zamudio, they arrested Zamudio because Zamudio was posting in DEC. This is me surmising, but I think from the court case they mentioned that like in his Facebook, or I've seen screenshots of his Facebook too, in his Facebook profile picture shortly before his arrest, he had a short-barreled rifle, which is an NFA item which you can't have in California, and that short-barreled rifle was suppressed. And again, a suppressor is an NFA item, and it's not legal in California. So it's not a good idea to make like 2 felonies your Facebook banner image, as a rule. And so I'm guessing that's how he got found. I don't know, but in the court case anyway, he was prosecuted for these federal crimes, right, of having these items. But at that time, he surrendered his phone to them, and that's where they found this series of texts. I think it was just straight up iMessage texts, right? Like they weren't Signal, they weren't Telegram. With these other members of the Shadow Moses group, one of the things they said, they wanted to terrorize LA. Zamudio wanted to obtain explosives in order to set explosives. Like really serious stuff, right? Really, like stuff that I think, I don't know why it didn't get much coverage, other than that a lot was going on in the summer of 2020, but very, very concerning stuff. And like, it was, and he was not shy. And he was posting about wanting to kill people, about bringing his Glock to protests, about how he was going to shoot someone at BLM protests, right? There was a big rally in La Mesa on August 1st, sort of on this 2-month anniversary of the biggest rally in La Mesa, right, where the banks were burned, and Leslie Furcron lost her eye because she was shot in the face by a police officer. And extraordinarily poor OPSEC on their part, which has obviously done them in. Some of the stuff in that federal case, I would say, was very strange. For instance, the sheriff was talking about how he'd like beaten a young black man who had been arrested, and like how he had done some stuff in a gun store at a FFL. But then there isn't a federal firearms licensee in the area where he would have worked as a deputy, and the sheriff who he worked for was black. Not that precludes like racist people can work for black people or with black people, of course. But the case was strange. I haven't seen a case against a deputy. I haven't checked for a couple of months. But like he was the one scratching the serial number of firearms and nicking explosives from work and hiding them, right? Like so, that whole thing is very weird. There's probably if someone's in that area of Georgia, it's worth looking into. Like Georgia Public Right.
So how was he, James? How was he connected to the Zamudis? Was in San Diego. How were the two of them connected?
They were texting.
But we don't know
how they met. No.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so they were texting as part of this group. I'm guessing they met on some kind of message board or something. Zamudio had previously lived in near Coeur d'Alene in Idaho, which is a place which has a long history of white supremacism.
Call me shocked.
Yeah, right. Like when we're talking about places where white supremacists with guns go, right? That's Aryan nations. It's all that stuff.
Right.
And
now Zamudi was a member of Exiled Patriots, or what was his connection?
So he was posting in the DEC Facebook group.
Oh, the Defendies County Facebook.
Yeah,
okay.
I think this was pre-fracture. So I think that was before all that happened. But he didn't his Facebook page showed him out with his weapons near the border and stuff. I was looking for sort of overt white supremacist stuff or Nazi stuff, and it wasn't there. but it's just very clearly someone who, if you'd looked at the page, you'd have thought he was like Bortak or like a troop, right? Except that generally, if you're a soldier on exercise, you don't post that many pictures of yourself. But
right.
Yeah, if you looked at it, he's like multicam, high cut helmet, open carry sidearm, open carry long arm, right? Like he looks like he's out there like as a soldier.
Right.
But he's not. Jerry knew when he took a second to be like, is this a Bortak guy who just posts too much? Or is this, as it turns out, just a civilian who's acquired? And we've had a number of these, right? There was another guy in Imperial County who was manufacturing silencers. Brian Thibodeau was his name, I think, or Brandon Thibodeau. Thibodeau was his last name. He may pronounce it differently. But again, we had a federal case for that in San Diego, right? This guy had the Turner Diaries. He had some Nazi uniforms in his house. He had SS stuff. And what I think he was doing was buying... this gets a little into the weeds, but he was buying things that are called solvent traps, which are not actually for trapping solvents. They're just a precursor to making a suppressor to make your rifle quieter. Because you can't legally obtain a suppressor in California, people will have to buy these things, which are not controlled in a technical sense, right? Because they're not yet a suppressor. But if you have access to a drill press to drop a hole right through it, then you've made yourself a suppressor, essentially. So they're very, very, very easy to convert into a suppressor. And there is a legal pathway to do that, filing a Form 1. He didn't do that.
Right. So you're supposed to apply for a serial number and whatnot. But most of these folks, my understanding is that they don't do that. And they don't even do it with when they buy gun parts and create guns. They're supposed to file for a number, get the number, put on it, but they don't do it.
Yeah, in some states you don't have to file for a number. It depends where you are.
No, here in California you do.
Here in California, you have to file for a number, and I think you also have to embed a certain amount of steel in it. It's one of those laws, right? Where like I've written a lot about 3D printed guns in a different context, which is in Myanmar, where young people fighting the government coup will use 3D printed guns to defend democracy, and I think it's great. Unfortunately, the same thing that empowers them empowers anyone else, right? Which is that, gun control is becoming a thing of the past, I think, with these 3D printed weapons, right? All you need is a 3D printer and a hardware store to buy a pipe. Right. Ammunition is a little different, but yeah, it's certainly very possible. Where Thibodeau screwed up is that he ordered this stuff on AliExpress, and that meant that it came through customs, right? And that's not a clever thing to do.
No, big red flag.
Yeah, I think that's where it's identified coming into the country. They have that in there because it was first a Homeland Security investigation.
Right.
So that was not smart on his part. If he'd ordered them through USPS, he was 18, he's very young. If he'd ordered them through USPS, he'd probably still be out there, with a suppressed weapon. It doesn't make it hugely more dangerous, if I'm being honest, but it is a crime, and it's not a loophole so much as a fucking giant crevasse in the legislation that you can do that. So yeah, we've had a couple of those. He seems to have been largely radicalized online, for what it's worth. He actually had
that seems to generally be the case. Was he active on Telegram? Are you aware?
So I couldn't find him, and there wasn't much of that in the court case. He must have got that stuff from somewhere, right? Like, he's 18 years old. Like, he must have got, and I don't think he picked up the Turner Diaries at the school library. So,
well, let's talk about the Turner Diaries for a second for folks that don't know anything about the Turner Diaries. I obviously, if you work in right-wing extremism, this is a common thing you'll see with Nazis. But if you don't know what the Turner Diaries is, can you explain that to folks?
Yeah, so it's a novel by William Luther Pierce. He wrote it under a pen name, but it's basically depicts a race war in the United States, right? It's the I think the guy is called something Turner. in the protagonist of the novel, right? And in the book, they are fighting a race war against Jewish people, non-white people, liberals, and politicians, right? And it more or less depicts a systematic extermination of those people, to include this thing called the Day of the Rope, which explains itself. Right. It has been endemic in the racist right. So when we look at people who have done mass murder, right? When we look at I think McVeigh had read it. The people who did
100%.
The nail bombers in London had read it, right? Like it pops up in almost. I think Dylan Roof had a copy of it. Like I'm speaking from my memory, so sorry if I'm wrong.
No, you're right.
Like,
so far, you're 100% right. Yes, correct.
Yeah. So like
it's standard. It's a standard reading item for anybody that's in the right wing extremist movement, and it's been associated with so much violence.
Yeah.
And in fact, Day of the Rope was one of the things that they used to promote the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally, right? So you even saw flyers that had Day of the Rope on it, which is for folks that don't understand, we're saying Day of the Rope. That's exactly how it sounds. Anybody that is not a white Aryan is going to end up on the end of a rope, basically. It's pretty dismal.
Yeah, it's like I know someone writing like Lone Wolf Holocaust fanfic stuff. It's bad. It's very bad. I wouldn't suggest people read it. Like, you don't need to read this to understand that it's bad.
Exactly.
Just that comes up. Sometimes people will ask me, and I don't think this is going to enhance your understanding or make you a better person or make you better able to combat the hate.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
Save yourself that, I think. But it's bad. It pops up. You know, you can read about it, look up the ADL page. But basically, if someone has done a racially motivated murder, then they probably have this book ends up.
Or they reference it in manifestos, or I mean, you see it a lot of the Telegram rooms, right? They make reference to the Turner Diaries too. So
yeah, and like the correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation. Like I'm sure a lot of these people have dictionaries in their homes too, but I think the dictionary doesn't explicitly depict a mass murder of non-white people. So I think we can reasonably say that it's related to feeling that way. Not a great read, so probably would have best avoided.
Best avoid it, right? All right, so that's very informative. Now, New Patriot Wave, also a San Diego-based group that I don't know much about. I've seen, I've seen some guys wearing these shirts. I know that they were part of promoting rallies down there, Stop the Steal rallies in San Diego. Also, Colin, can we put on the screen? I found a photo of a guy wearing a New Patriot Wave shirt. And in the back, on the right-hand side there, you will see Swedish Scarf, the infamous January 6th insurrectionist who has yet to be identified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. So a lot of these people, they seem to have taken a group to the insurrection, right? Something I've written about before. They sort of came to prominence when a member of their group, whose name's eluding me right now, but destroyed a George Floyd memorial, but filmed himself doing it, and was identified by anti-fascists in Northern California. And they've since promoted events in San Diego, but I think lots of them are not from San Diego. It's a little hard to say how much of it is them and how much of it is them just serving as a nucleus for other people. But I've certainly, then another group that certainly has helped the right to come to San Diego and made San Diego feel like a safe space for those big right-wing gatherings.
I mean,
I
think it sort of is.
And I think I think KPBS or the Union Tribune, someone did a decent investigation into the.
I think Ken Stone did, didn't he? I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, Ken's certainly done a lot, right, on how the right and the left are handled very, very differently in San Diego, right? And this is the county with a long history of real serious problems with white supremacy, right? Going back to Metzger and David Duke himself, it's been a long time that those people have.
That's right. Tom Metzger was from Fallbrook, which is San Diego County. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. He's dead now, but thankfully.
Yeah.
But
he did.
So Metzger and his white Aryan resistance were here, and I think that's created just a long that that tendency has long roots, right? Julian, the town of Julian, was founded by escaped Confederate, I think released Confederate POWs.
Oh, I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah.
So Julian is also interior of San Diego County.
Yeah.
And they have lots of apple groves there, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, famous for apples and apple pies. And like it doesn't mean that like everyone at Julian is a racist, right? But like I've seen some like Confederate flags out there.
There's actually a 5-star Michelin restaurant in Julian, California. True story.
Oh wow!
So it's not all Nazis.
Yeah, the pies are good too. If your budget doesn't stretch to the Michelin stuff, yeah, have a pie. Nice place. I like Julian. I like to camp. I like to rock climb. It's a nice place. But yeah, like it. I just want folks to know that, like, I think sometimes we get away with a lot because we're in California. But like this, we are sometimes called the Deep South of California. There's a lot of other stuff in San Diego that is underreported on. Like, there's a reason people call it Enron by the Sea. Like, our politics is...
Enron by the Sea? Okay.
Yeah. Like, if we didn't have tourism, we'd be like a banana republic. But our politics is very corrupt. There's a lot of special interest stuff. Even our Democrats suck, which is, I know, not a problem unique to San Diego. But...
No,
we've had persistent issues with a lot of different things, but one of them is with this asymmetrical treatment of the right and the left, and I don't think that's changing anytime soon. We have a sheriff's election happening right now with our undersheriff running against John Hemmerling, who's the Republican candidate. So like our left candidate is someone who's presided over like a very, very high number of deaths of incarcerated people. And then running against that is a guy who was doing trans bathroom panic stuff.
You have two bad choices. Yeah, we often have that in LA too. You have bad choice A, bad choice B. I don't know. Pick your poison, right?
Right.
Let's turn to your piece in The Nation that you wrote on who are the sons of Confederate veterans. Can we put that up, Colin? So this was an interesting article for me because I had never heard of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. This was a new organization, but they seem like they're a rather large one. 57,000 names reveals members of neo-Confederate group in military, government, and academia. Walk us through your article here and give us some details.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to pull it up myself because it's a little while since I wrote that. So this was, and like, I just want the credit for the leak. It's not like it's an anti-fascist group in Atlanta who obtained this information, not me, and they deserve all the credit for that and for exposing this group, I guess. So the SCV are definitely a broad church. I've had people reach out to me, and you know, I've tried to engage them further and get something on the record and haven't been able to do that, being like, I am part of this group and I reject this and that. This normally happens with these big groups, right? I think I think they would be in the minority. You are celebrating like a group of people who went to war to defend people owning other people, right? And that's not okay. So what they are is a large group of people directly descended from veterans who fought for the Confederacy, right? Just like the name suggests. They're all men. Daughters of the Confederacy would be the female equivalent, and I think they're not trans-positive, I'm guessing, so they pretty much define it like that. The SCV's stated goal is a vindication of the cause of the Confederacy, and you can find their website, and you can find some shit about history, which I have a PhD in history, is not true. I think it's as close as we've got to establish historical fact that most black people did not come to the United States as indentured servants during the time, the period before 1865, right? Which is one of the claims that they make on their website, right? So in theory,
they actually say that. Wait, so are they trying to like pretend slavery wasn't really a thing, that they were all indentured servants? That's kind of wild.
It's kind of a like throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks scenario, where there's like slavery wasn't that bad, slave owners were very nice to slaves, people fucking loved being enslaved, and isn't it worse afterwards because like some kind of critique of capitalism, you know, like people are poor now or whatever, and then the sort of, actually mostly people weren't slaves, they came voluntarily. There's slavery existed in Africa, which of course is kind of collapsing a complex thing into a simple thing and making it a lie. chattel slavery is nothing like anything that existed elsewhere. And so they're a broad group. They have these different chapters all over the country. Some are more active than others. They're called camps. And I was able to obtain a number of their names, the camp that they're from, their email addresses, etc. So we did a bunch of slicing of this data different ways, try to work out ways to present it to people that would be most palatable. And what we did was we got some of the big numbers to illustrate the scale, right? And then to look at where the most populous groups were, and it won't surprise people to hear, right, that all of the biggest camps were in the Old South. But then we also sort of broke it down. This took a lot of help from a lot of people using Excel, which is not my strong point. The way we were able to find more people was by breaking down the top level domain of the email, right? So .gov or .edu. What we found there was, so the government people I've identified are there because they use their government email addresses to sign up. So again, just real master race energy. And
it's wild too when you see also the Oath Keepers League database, how many police officers use their police officer emails to sign up for membership. I was kind of shocked by that.
Yeah, I think it's part of it. Is it that it's this like wrapping white supremacy in the American flag thing, or the Confederate flag? In this
they're
case.
not ashamed of it. Obviously, they don't see the problem.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it, right? Like we found a lot of just so people are familiar with some of the stuff the SCV has done recently. They had a "Make Dixie Great Again" banner, which they've been displaying like in the Trump era, right? They tried to get I think it's in Mississippi. They tried to have a license plate made which has Nathan Bedford Forrest, the founder of the Klan, on it. And they tried to get people to boycott NASCAR after NASCAR did the BLM stuff. They hired a plane to fly over the Talladega Speedway with a Confederate flag behind it.
Wow.
Remember NASCAR banned Confederate flags in June of 2020? Yeah, so they decided to fly over it. It's stuff like that, right? Like it's kind of performative stuff, but they have membership overlap with the Leader of the South. People will be familiar with the Sines versus Kessler lawsuit, right? Which was a civil suit against.
I know you mentioned this in your article, and I would like to talk about this. So Kessler, this is very important. Kessler was one of the guys that planned the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville that was so deadly with all the neo-Nazi groups. They were sued over that. They've obviously lost the lawsuit, millions of dollars. So what's the connection there?
Yeah, so Sines versus Kessler, like you say, is this suit that basically identifies and then deposes, crucially, I think, the people who organized the deadly Unite the Right rally. And 3 of those people were on the list, on my list of members of FCV, right? Heimbach was one of them. Michael Hill.
Michael Heimbach he's one of the members of this group, Michael Heimbach. So he's a hardcore neo-Nazi.
Matthew Heimbach, yeah.
Matthew, sorry, yes.
Yeah, and I think what Heimbach maybe, I don't know if he's an active member because I think he had an EDU email address in the thing, but then the data I had was a little outdated, so he may have updated his email address. Who knows? Heimbach joined when he was at Townsend University, right? And I think that might be an interesting angle from which to approach or to understand this. Is that it can serve as a gateway to other things for some people, right? And if we have these 50,000 people and then only 10% of them follow that gateway, that's still a problem. And so. Yeah, that's Heimbach, and then Hill and Tubbs, Michael Tubbs, both of these guys being League of the South, which is a sort of more hardcore version of SCV. Another SCV member, whose name eludes me, was arrested for hate crimes for beating up an anti-fascist at a Richard Spencer speech. So yeah, like a number of them have definitely done hate crimes, and then 20 local government employees, 9 Homeland Security employees, 6 in the DOJ, 4 in the DOI. That's with their .gov email addresses, right? So I'm not saying that that's an exhaustive list. I'm saying that that's a that's something of a list. And then of course universities, right? It won't shock anyone who's familiar with this stuff to know that the Citadel was top of the list there, right?
Right.
and like Auburn, again, universities like Ole Miss, these universities, these big old universities in the South, right? But nonetheless, like it's and some of these professors, educators, whatever, would be, I'm sure, very open about their membership because they don't see it as a concern. Right. But I think, given the history of this group, it is a concern given the fact that these are all integrated universities, whether they like it or not. And I'm sure some of these institutions, like I'm trying to think. I think the SPLC had a decent podcast actually on one of these institutions and how it kind of met the 2020, or didn't meet, obviously, the 2020 moment. I thought it was interesting to find these people, all these different law enforcement people. I never got, obviously, if you're going to name someone in a story, you're legally going to notify them. I never really heard back from them. I never really heard of any consequences because it's not per se prohibited, right? But a number of them were at the federal law enforcement training centers in Glencoe, Georgia, which is, of course, not that far from where Ahmaud Arbery was murdered. And like that institution in particular, right? It'll take you not very long to Google some of the issues that institution has had. We talk about federal law enforcement having issues with race, like the Good Old Boys Roundup is probably the primary example of that, where ATF agents were having just a super racist barbecue, I guess is a good way to describe it. Again, people can Google it, but these are, that's at the very least, like if these people aren't actively like kind of sleeper cell Nazis or whatever, which I think is not most of them. I don't think you're seeing things from an unbiased perspective with regards to race if you're part of a group that celebrates the Confederacy, right?
It's sort of that whole red pilling thing too, James. So, you start off like being anti-immigration, or you start off being like, well, the Confederate flag's not so bad, or we're going to redefine what chattel slavery actually is. Maybe there were some benefits there. This gross stuff, right? But maybe mild-mannered compared to what some of the Nazis have to say. But it is a step in that direction. And I think if these guys are, hanging out with Hambach and Jason Kessler, there's definitely that element there. So, my worry is always like, are these folks in these echo chambers where they're becoming more radicalized to these ideas?
Yeah, and I think when you start eroding the truth, right? When you start being like, everything you've learned isn't true, everything you know about the Confederacy isn't true, right? You get on you get on a slippery slope then, and you see this all the time with this is what Russia does, right? With its state propaganda, it just throws a bunch of darts at the notion of the truth.
See what sticks.
See what sticks, and just erodes the notion of the truth, and then does stuff and straight up denies it. And it's a tactic that works, right? Like for some of these people, the erosion of truth and consensus has been successful.
Oh, 100%, because they end up normalizing other things that are, not so great.
Yeah,
I think it's a problem.
Yeah, like these societal kind
Interesting.
Yeah, go ahead.
I said interesting. This was not a group I was aware of until I read your piece.
No, they're not like active, they're not out there doing so. They're out there protecting Confederate statues and flying around with flags and stuff. But yeah, they're numerous. They're in every state in the Union. They're in federal government. They're in local law enforcement. They're in local government. And like I say, at the very least, it's a bias.
Yeah. Speaking of local law enforcement, I wanted to discuss this recent article that's coming out in regards to Charlottesville and a police officer that marched at the Nazi rally in Charlottesville and has now been outed. Colin, can we put that up? I want to go through this a little bit. All right, so this is an exclusive HuffPost report, confirms that Massachusetts police officer John Donnelly played a key role in the violent Unite the Right rally 5 years ago. Scroll down here. So a Massachusetts police officer attended the deadly Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia 5 years ago and acted in key security and planning roles, HuffPost has confirmed. He also used an alias to post racist and anti-Semitic comments online. The officer, John Donnelly, was still an active duty member of the police force until Thursday, shortly after HuffPost inquired about his status with the department and role in the deadly white supremacist rally. Donnelly, 33, was a patrolman for the Woburn Police Department near Boston, where he has been employed since 2015. But on the morning of August 12th, 2017, Donnelly could be seen on video arriving at the Charlottesville rally with Richard Spencer, a prominent white supremacist for whom Donnelly was apparently acting as a security guard for. Spencer, Donnelly, and a coterie of other suit and tie fascists worked their way into a city park where they held court beneath a statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee, posing for photos and talking into live streams. So, James, it's not shocking to hear the story because we know that there has long been connections with right-wing extremists and local police forces. Tom Metzger, Richard Spencer, other, white supremacists have long said that the way they spread their vitriol, the way they spread their ideology is by infiltrating law enforcement, military, and government. And I think that we've seen them become semi-successful with some of this. And I think this is just a example of that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think if you look at groups like the Oath Keepers, right, who explicitly are law enforcement or military, or formerly law enforcement or military, then again, right, that's a very palatable, I think the name Oath Keepers is somewhat tarnished because of their involvement in January 6th, but it's very palatable to a lot more people than I'm a Nazi, right? By saying, oh, you're keeping your oath to defend the Constitution from enemies, foreign and domestic. Who wouldn't want to do that? Good red-blooded American people. Men, I think, specifically men. So they have been a powerful force in recruiting military and law enforcement people into the right. Yeah, and they're the RAND Corporation did a pretty decent report on extremism in the military, which is worth looking up if people want to deep dive on this. But it's the RAND Corporation, right? But it is an issue that, and the military, there have been a number of Marines, especially, right, who have been outed as being in Patriot Front was one that springs to mind, but of other right-wing groups too, right? And these certain units seem to have set a larger issue than others, which suggests that maybe folks are going in with that ideology and joining that unit rather than getting that ideology in service, which is probably a good thing. It's probably better than anyone who joins gets radicalized to the right.
Right.
But yeah, this thing, I don't know. It's not shocking that this person was at Charlottesville. It's not particularly it's a good piece of reporting. It's a good piece of open source reporting. It looks like a number of anti-fascists were able to identify we
can talk about that. There is a group that has now been set up I think it was set up on the 5th year anniversary of Charlottesville, actually, so maybe 2 months ago. So it's called Ignite the Right. It's a website, and it works much the same way that the Sedition Trackers works for January 6th insurrectionists, right? So this is a website where they are posting photos of folks that have yet to be identified that attended the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally. So they're trying to identify, the folks that haven't been identified yet. So I think that they've been successful in that. My understanding is this particular individual's identified with facial recognition software. In the article, they talk about how he is also a real estate agent, believe it or not, and he caters to law enforcement clients. But he had this large billboard put up with his face, and that was how, with his facial recognition software, that's how they came to identify him. But, tangential to that, I think the important issue here is that when we have folks with these types of ideologies in law enforcement, obviously biased policing is really problematic. And we have individuals with this ideology that just makes it worse. How many cases has this guy been involved in that are corrupted, that were based on racial beliefs where justice was most definitely not served? I think this calls into question anything that he was associated with.
Yeah, look, just want to say that the police come from slave patrols, and as an institution, they're founded on racism. And
the sheriff's department definitely does. Yeah.
Yeah, and there has been a great deal done to change that, and so the institution has shown itself to be biased, but even within that, having these individuals is deeply troubling, right? And every single person that he has investigated, every single investigation he's been part of, ought to be re-examined now. Right?
I agree.
Every person he's arrested, right? I hope that they're able to sue. Like, I hope if people have been wrongfully arrested, if people's lives have been derailed by this guy being a bigoted racist, then like they should get restitution from that. It's and it is a failure of his. So one thing I've tried to do with very little success, it's a huge project and it needs. We had some funding and that funding dried up. Was like, I'm very interested to know how many police officers from how many departments, agencies all across the country put in requests for time off January 5th, January 6th, January 7th, 2021, right? It's a big data project, right? And it's not one I'm really equipped to do with my sort of knowledge of computer stuff. It's not the kind of journalist I am. But we tried to automate public records requests to every agency in the country. Because that's a project. If you want to do it, get after it. If someone's got the skills to do that, like, more power.
Yeah, no, it's actually an interesting idea, I think. Yeah, 100%.
Right.
I mean, we know there were plenty. Oh, there were plenty of law officers. I mean, I know there were LAPD officers. Now, but the other question is just because they attended January 6th doesn't mean they were part of the insurrection. They could have just been there.
Yeah. I think if you're attending Charlottesville, you done.
Charlottesville, however, no. Yeah, there is no way. There is, from my perspective, there's no leeway when it comes to Charlottesville. If you were at Charlottesville and you participated in the Unite the Right, the rally, there's just no leeway here. Either you're a Nazi or you're a Nazi. I'm sorry. You knew who you were surrounded by. You knew in advance who the participants were going to be. There's just absolutely no leeway here.
I think, like, you look, any reasonable person walks up there, sees a bunch of swastikas and Valknuts and all kinds of, like, Hitler did nothing wrong people. Right. You turn around and leave, right? Like, you hung around with that crowd, then I'm sorry, but
you knew exactly where you were, what you were doing, 100%.
Yeah,
so
like, their stank is on you.
Yeah,
and so it should be.
And so, exactly. Yeah. But, January 6th, that's a little bit different. There were people there that just, maybe really believed the big lie and were just, Trump supporters. So not everybody that was there did participate in the insurrection. But, the ones that did, that we need to know about that.
Yeah, and a lot of those people still haven't been identified, right? A lot of those people. And look, it doesn't really need to be said again, but I'll say it again. Like, if that had been a BLM rally and they got inside the Capitol, like, people would have died. Like, people died anyway. A lot of people would have died.
A lot of people, it would have been much more violent. I think the response would have been much quicker and nastier. The National Guard would have been sent in immediately.
Yeah, I think. Yeah,
I agree with you.
Yeah. The shit was a bad scene, and like, while with their bringing forward and like, I know we had people pleading guilty. Just from like the perspective of someone who does the history of the 1930s, like seeing them trying to do a failed coup is a thing that we've seen before, and like seeing the state not jump down the throat of everyone who did it is a thing that we've seen before, and the way that thing ended with the Holocaust last time.
Right. Right, indeed.
Not saying that
James,
we're like going to the Holocaust, but yeah.
No, but I mean, I do think that there is an increase in extremism and political violence. I don't see it getting tamped down anytime soon. I think we're headed for more of that. I also think it's interesting that we've seen a lot of studies come out recently in polls as well, basically saying that the likelihood of, almost a civil war happening are much stronger than they were 4 years ago. So we'll see. James, what are you working on now? Anything interesting?
A couple of things. My big thing at the moment is I've got the podcast series coming out on the podcast It Could Happen Here, which is part of Cool Zone Media, about the civil war in Myanmar. Super interesting to me. I think, like, with what you're saying about the US, I've been covering international stuff more because there's like a hope that things might change, and that's nice. Like seeing young people coming together across ethnic and gender and religious divides to fight for democracy is really cool. And having been fortunate enough to meet some of those people has been really inspiring for me. So I'm doing that. Looking to get over to Ukraine at some point, but who knows? Maybe I'm just interested in that conflict and sort of the leftists fighting there. And then I'm always working on it. I've written a book and I'm sort of working on another book, but that's a perpetual working on and then finishing. So
right, yeah, books can take many years to write. That's definitely the case. If folks want to find your work, follow you on Twitter, what are your handles and whatnot?
So it's just Twitter, so the only one I do, and that's just my name, James Stout. I have jamesstout.net, which I'm perpetually late to update, but that's got some of my writing. And then I have a Patreon where I write about things that interest me, and I hope will interest you. And I understand that some of those things, the book and the Patreon, are sort of cost prohibitive for some people, so I make the Patreon articles free after a couple of months. The book you can get in your library, and if you can't get it in your library, then ask them. But it's very expensive, and it's an academic book, and it's fine if you can't afford it.
What is the name of your academic? I have an academic book too. They are more expensive. It's crazy.
It's like $50 from Palgrave.
Wow.
It's called The Popular Front and the 1936 Berlin Olympics. I was looking to see if I had a copy, but I don't. It's that expensive. So it's a book about how sport was used in the 1930s to create international anti-fascist alliances. So if you're interested in anti-fascism, the biggest anti-fascist spectacle on earth is what they called it. It was the Olympics that were the alternative to Hitler's Olympics that never happened because the Spanish Civil War happened. But 400 of the athletes stayed behind because they come to do an anti-fascist Olympics, and they stayed to kill fascists. And I think that's very admirable. So there.
Indeed. It is a part of history that doesn't get discussed very much. We'll have to have you back on to talk about only this, maybe.
Yeah, I got my Spanish Republic flag right behind me. I mean,
because listen, I mean, fascism is increasing everywhere. Fascism is also coming back to Europe again. It's very concerning to see that happening. Something to keep an eye on. All right, thanks.
Vox, National Front.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, it won't surprise people to know that I'm not from America, but yes, it is coming back to Europe.
You're from London, or?
No, I'm from the West Midlands.
Okay.
Yeah, I grew up in the countryside and been here a long time. But yeah, it's a global problem, and I think it demands a global solution, which is where solidarity and mutual aid and networking and helping each other come in. So people should do that.
Right on. All right. Thanks for joining us on Right Wing Insanity Report. Interesting information. And we'll see everyone next week.